Brandis, this fall, more and more colleges and universities are making COVID-19 vaccination a requirement for staff and students. But so far, the vast majority of employers are not requiring the same of their employees. But when can vaccines be required, and what rights to refuse does a person have? Joining us to discuss these issues are Andrew Challenger from job outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas, Al Genie, Professor Emeritus of Business Ethics at Loyola University Chicago, and Colleen Connell, Executive Director at the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois. And thank you all for joining us. Colleen Connell, if I can begin with you, do colleges and private employers have the right to require their students and employees to get a vaccination?
Word, Phil, yes. Vaccine mandates by the government or school or an employer can be consistent with civil liberties principles when, as is the situation now, there's a grave threat to public health, the vaccines are safe and effective, and there are no equally effective, less intrusive measures available.
How about the federal government? Could the federal government, it hasn't so far obviously, but could the federal government say, okay, this is, we're re-entering a critical period again. At this point, all citizens must be vaccinated. Does the federal government have that power?
So, Phil, I think that every mandate would have to be evaluated in terms of the context and scope of it. But theoretically, yes, so long as there were, for example, exemptions for people who had health issues that would make accepting the vaccine a real risk for them. But our experience has been really that most mandates have been more focused, as for example, elementary schools for a long time have required proof of vaccination against childhood diseases as a condition of being, admitted to school. Likewise, we're seeing that this fall, as a number of institutions, including several here in Chicago, have advised students that if they want to be present for in-class learning, they need to be vaccinated.
Andrew Challenger, right now your company found that in a recent survey of human resource managers, only 3% of companies were going to mandate that their employees get vaccinated. Why do you think that number is so low?
Yeah, it is. It's a really low number. And clearly, most companies would love to have their employees vaccinated, not have that risk of an outbreak within their offices. But this has also become a political issue. It's an issue that's dividing households, it's dividing companies internally. And it's just too hot and difficult for many companies to make that choice to actually mandate it. In most cases, companies are instead trying to use carrots to incentivize people, strongly encourage them by saying, hey, we're going to have maskless areas where you can be in the office, but only if you have your vaccine. Some companies are even considering doing small payments or giving extra vacation days to encourage that vaccine adoption.
In fact, your company did a survey of that, and we have the results from that, where you mentioned that 29% said that they would consider incentives, that is to say the carrot and not the stick. 9% said that they are already offering incentives, and less than half said no. Al Genie, we heard from Colleen that businesses, colleges, and even the federal government can require vaccinations. How do you view the ethics of mandated vaccinations?
Well, I think Colleen has laid out perfectly adequately the legalities involved, but I think the ethical question is so primary. It's about individuals living in commonwealth. If we live in common, what are our responsibilities to others? What are our responsibilities to any organization we join? For example, Notre Dame has required vaccination in order for admission to the university. They've also required a certain SAT score. And if I want to go there as a student, or I send my child there, I have to comply with those rules. But it really comes down to an old Stoic principle. There's no such thing as a bee. Bees only exist amongst other bees, in a colony of bees. If that's true, and we want to participate in the collectivity of others, we have to have certain rules. So I think the ethical requirement is pretty clear. We are political animals, as Aristotle said, but we need rules in order to engage together for all sides to be comfortable.
Colleen Connell, some critics on the right take the view that vaccines, social distancing, and face masks amount to what they consider authoritarian intervention. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that's too simplistic, Phil. government, as Al said, really does have the authority under our Constitution to create certain rules of engagement that the government can show a sufficiently important or compelling reason to enact that rule or regulation. And the public health crisis that we have seen unroll over the past year, with 572,000 Americans at a minimum dead and more than 3 million dead across the world, and a highly contagious disease. The individual liberty, as you will, to make a decision about medical care, including refusing medical care, really does not carry with it right to make decisions that have a negative impact on other human beings. And so, this is sort of the law again behind sort of public health regulations. You can refuse a blood transfusion even if your doctor says that you will die if you don't have it. That right to refuse life-saving medical care for you does not carry with it the right to endanger the community. You can't stand in the middle of an emergency room door and block, an ambulance from, bringing somebody in to get a blood transfusion.
And you know what? Sometimes when we're interviewing people, we can't block their dogs from barking either. Andrew Challenger, in terms of vaccinations, what does being vaccinated do to someone who's looking for a job in terms of their potential employment?
Yeah, when we're talking to job seekers right now, we tell them, let potential employers know that you're vaccinated. It's an asset right now, right? Less than 30% of the population is fully vaccinated in this country. A lot of those people are outside of the working age of population. So if you have that, you definitely want employers to know.
Yeah.
We're seeing in the restaurant industry right now where they're trying to hire tens and tens of thousands of people, despite the fact that we have a huge pool of unemployed people still because of COVID, more than 8 million people. They're running into artificial labor shortages because there's not enough people that can safely go back to work.
Yeah.
Al Genie, we heard at the top of the show that the city is contemplating what they're calling a Vax Pass. That is for young people. If you have a pass that you can more easily enter into music festivals and that sort of thing. Are you okay with that? The prospect of showing papers. There's such a lot of baggage attached to that sort of thing.
I'm not sure
how are you with that?
I'm not sure of that, Phil. First of all, I've been vaccinated, so I've got my card, and I keep it in my wallet should I be asked. And by the way, in Israel, they're doing that already. You could go to theater if you show your certification that you've been inoculated. So I think, again, under the rubric of commonwealth, the well-being of the commons, that is all of us who are participating in it, it's not an extraordinary, and in fact, it's an enlightened position. And I think we have to remember, this is a plague. And in my lifetime, we've lived through 3 plagues in this society. Polio in the 50s, the AIDS epidemic that was, and then in 2002, the SARS thing, which has at least been contained. But polio doesn't exist as a major disease anymore because of vaccinations, because of that requirement. So I think there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of misinformation about these vaccines. But even the people who have been sick, who died, unfortunately, and the vaccine, the one-shot vaccine, that's 8 people in 4 million. I am sorry for those 8 people. But when we consider the well-being of millions, risks have to be taken and ethical obligations have to be lived up to.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Al Genie, thank you so much. Likewise, Andrew Challenger and Colleen Connell. Thank you all.
Thank you, Phil.